Hey, friends. So we're back for another episode of the Momentum Focus podcast. And this is one of your co-hosts, Amia Freeman. As with every episode, I promise that the only thing that will ever be published and recorded in this space is whatever God has given full permission to. And so here we are back again with another episode. We are still in the truth of what it looks like to have strength and courage, and what that looks like specifically for you in the season that you're in, knowing and trusting that God meets us exactly where we are and gives us what we need in order for us not to just survive. Like, God is in the business of us thriving. He is not in the business of us barely making it. It might look dark. It might feel mundane. It might feel like we're circling the same mountain, but trust me, even when we can't see his hand or what he's doing something. So whatever season you're in, whether you feel like you're walking through a valley or you feel like you're climbing and getting closer to the top and you can feel the altitude change, God is in it with you. We are in it with you. And it is our goal to see to it that every conversation we have helps you to adjust your focus wherever you are. So today, I get the honor of sharing this microphone with someone that I have gotten to honor from a distance. I love social media because I get to meet people that I've never met. And regardless of what people him and haw and gnarl at, it can be a great space that has cultivated connections and friendships and kindred spirits, like Rachel. Y'all, I remember when she officially gave us a name and said, I have a name for this thing. I have a name. I know what I'm calling it now. And being a word nerd, I was like, oh, she's about to come out with like some Shakespearean message. Um, and the name that she was coming up with was this space that she had invited us into to share our words, which was humbling as a writer to give other people your own space to share their words. It says, I am confident in the words that God gave me. I don't need to be concerned that their words will take my words or take the place of my words. Um, so I'm going to let her share the story of all of that. But y'all, would you do me a favor and welcome? I'm saying welcome as if we were in front of a live audience and we were at like a poetry slam and everybody starts snapping their fingers.
I wish.
That would be my dream, you know? I'm just like, come on, y'all. But y'all, I get to share the microphone with Rachel Kang, and it blesses me to have a fellow writer, a fellow speaker, a thought leader. Although I hate using the word thought leader because we are all thought leaders, but just someone who uses her words to provoke other people's words. So Rachel, could you just introduce yourself officially, tell the people what you do, tell them what you love?
Wow. Well, I just have to thank you, first of all, for having me as your honored guest. I'm so excited to share conversation with you. And yeah, and just I think this is really our first conversation that we're going to share together. So I'm excited for that. And gosh, I mean, you've already said so much that I want to respond to, but first I'll introduce myself. I like to say that I am a writer of poems, prose, and other pieces. That phrase kind of came because I had such a hard time categorizing myself. There are so many different things that I write, different mediums, just as a lot of us, some of us write articles and poems and songs, and we're all over the map. And so as a writer, I kind of found myself in that position. And I remember when I was coming up with a new bio and thought, okay, well, I write poems and I write prose, and there's lots of other little pieces that I write too. I write articles and I write songs, and I write content sometimes for people. And so I'm really finding that I'm growing into that phrase, because I do believe in diversity of giftings and passions and mediums. I, as you said, am the creator of Indelible Ink Writers, which is a community for diverse creatives, as I was just explaining, people who love to journal, or people who love to write on Instagram, as we all do, people who write poems. And sometimes we even consider ourselves closet poets, because there's so many people out there that actually write poems, but they are afraid to claim that name poet. And so we've given them this name closet poets, because they hide away and sneak writing poems. But yeah, this was about 3 years ago, to the month actually, where I stepped out and I created this community. And really what that all stemmed from was I studied writing in college, and I remember when I chose to study writing, it really was just it wasn't something that I thought I would do. It was always something that I loved, something that was a part of me. Since I was a little girl, I was writing poems and songs and journal entries, like I said, but I never thought that I would make a pursuit out of it, a career pursuit at that. And so here I am, a couple years outside of graduating college with my degree in creative writing. And to make a long story short, it's like this light bulb just clicked in my head, where I took this thing that for so many years was a therapy for myself. And I thought, oh my goodness, instead of hoarding this experience to myself, I could use it as an invitation. I could use it to gather other people that are possibly out there like me, that are doing the same thing, using writing for the sake of expression or creative release, to explore their world as a means of faith. And so that's kind of how Indelible Ink Writers came to be. And it is slowly growing and gaining momentum. And I would say that it's a small community. There's about 400 people in our group on Facebook, and then we've got, a good following on Instagram. But in terms of, I guess I don't really measure so much the numbers and the size. I measure the stories really that come through emails, or direct messages, where people are pouring out their hearts and saying how their confidence has grown, being surrounded in a community of other creatives that are just encouraging and spurring them on. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I could say about that. But that's a little bit of who I am, and what I'm really focused on doing at the moment. So
Yeah, I love that. I wrote down as you were talking an invitation to write, for an expression of, and I put dot dot dot, and then you kept talking, and then you said of faith. One of the things that myself and my co-host Raina, which Raina is who introduced me to you. So shout out to
yes,
Raina for that
yes, yes.
introduction. And
She is such a connection point for so many people.
she really is. She's a genuine connector. And
She
like
is.
we kept saying, we got to get her on the podcast. We got to get her on the podcast. So when you responded initially to the email, and you were in the process of switching over email accounts, I was like, I'm never gonna get her on this show.
Oh yeah, no, of course.
I'm grateful that you said yes to it.
Oh yeah, hands down.
I mean, specifically because of that statement of this invitation to expression, because that's what this podcast, I slowly came to learn. That's why God said to start this, was to give people the space to express what they were feeling, what the thoughts that were stirring in their hearts. For some people, it's expressed in the written form. Others, it's expressed audibly. And even though jokingly I said we started with, it felt like an open mic night, that was one of the things that God spoke to Raina about, what momentum focus is, that we are an open mic night.
Yeah. I
In
love that.
whatever space, whether it's the podcast, Instagram, if we host a workshop, it is an open mic night and we're just the MC, and we invite to the stage whoever the guest speaker is or presenter or what have you.
Yeah.
Um, and I love to hear that you, although you studied writing as that you have a degree in writing, that it's wholeheartedly a passion that keeps you going. I think because oftentimes we go after the degree or the certifications and it's not passion focused or it's
Mm-hmm.
not directly connected to our passion. And then there are some of us that have the degree and we're like, I have it, but I don't really know how I'm going to use it.
Mm-hmm.
But I really feel like this conversation is going to start speaking to the people that have tucked their passion away in
Yeah.
whatever form of communication that is. They've tucked the
Mm-hmm.
passion away, they tuck their words behind them, whatever form of expression that looks like. And I feel like God is bringing us all to a season to really use our voices and talk about what lights us up, what brings our soul alive, what, like you said, you don't measure the size of the groups, but the stories and the growth in the process of
Yeah.
the writing process. Um, so I'm going to ask you, and full transparency, like we started, I said, I don't have a set number of questions. As you talk, things are coming to mind. So I've been writing some things down feverishly.
Yes. Go for
Um,
it.
the closet poets. Let's talk about that person, the person that they know deep down inside that there's, I think the word writer scares people.
Mm-hmm.
Even as you introduced yourself, you're like, so I'm a writer. That's what they tell me, right? And I think when we think poet, we either think Shakespeare or Maya Angelou, or these words that seem to like seamlessly, without effort, flow out of a person.
Yeah.
But lately I've been stumbling across poets that they are just like thoughts on paper that are like, wow. And that's a lot of times I'll read things that you've posted that are thoughts that were swirling in my heart that I don't know if you've ever seen the movie A Beautiful Mind, where his
Yeah.
letters are floating
Yes.
around. I feel
Yes.
like that's what it
I
feels
just
like
watched
to
it
me with
recently. Yes.
words.
Yeah.
Words just float, and I'm like, I don't really know what order they're supposed to go in, but they're floating. And
Yeah.
oftentimes I'll read something that you wrote, and it feels like all my words were floating, and you just dropped them in the next
Oh.
stanza, and I'm like, that's what's been floating in my mind for the last 3 months. So
Yeah.
let's talk to the closet poet, writer, dreamer, visionary. Um, how would you help them get their thoughts on paper? Because I love like when you post the writing prompts that are like, ooh, I need 20 days to just write to that prompt. Like, how do you
Yeah.
pull that out of someone that knows I got a message, I just don't know how to structure it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, oh gosh, your question and your observations are so rich. And it takes me back to when I first started Indelible Ink Writers, which actually was under a different name at that time. It was Ink and Parchment.
Mm.
And whenever I would post in our group, I would address everyone as writers. So I would say, "Hey, writers, how are you doing today, writers?" And there was one particular post. I don't remember what it was or what I said, but there were a few people that were kind of having this ongoing conversation on they were in the group, but they didn't actually consider themselves as writers. And so I, being wanting to be this authentic encourager, was like, sure, you're a writer, you're in this group, you're writing words. And after a while of back and forth with comments and emails with some people, and after some time and thinking and even like reading and kind of just growing and I guess you would say evolving in my own beliefs and thought practices, I have come to side with those that do say, I don't consider myself a writer, but I'm here writing, or but I'm showing up and I'm answering this prompt, or I'm, choosing to write on my Instagram. I don't consider myself a writer, but here I am writing. And honestly, I applaud that. I accept that. I advocate that. I believe in that. Um, I love what you said something earlier about being a thought. What did you say?
Thought leader.
A thought leader. And I think that if we just pulled away from the layers of speaker and writer and author and poet and artist and songwriter, that underneath those layers, we would find, I don't want to say labels, but we would find these elements or characteristics of thinkers,
Mm.
person who feels, empathizer, human being, woman, mother. And so it's not so much the act of writing that I really want people to focus on. It's the experiences of their life, of their stories. Yeah, and so for those closet poets, I used to be one. I would write poems, and this was at a time when I was a young girl and I didn't consider myself a poet, but I heard words in my head and they accompanied feelings. And so the natural thing for me was to pick up a pen and to just simply get it out, And so I really love that idea of encouraging people to just get out their experiences and their stories, and allowing it to sound and look and be however it comes. We have a tendency to compare, just like you said. We think of Shakespeare, or Mary Oliver, who's one of my favorites these days. Shout out, today's Earth Day, and she writes a lot about earth and nature. So go read some Mary Oliver poems. But we have this idea in our head of what a poem should be, and of course there are some pre-established constructions of poetry, but really, just, I mean, you can write anything and it can come out with sound and sense, and that can be a poem. There's so much more that I could say to speak into that, but I do know there are some closet poets out there and they struggle with comparison. They fear being inauthentic, doing it wrong, being too much, being not enough, being uneducated. And so for those people, I say, shed those labels of writer and poet and author and speaker and podcaster and all this performance-based, stuff, and connect with who you are, and really at your core what you do: mother, human, person, thinker, neighbor.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, even just you speak so poetically. It just and then and again, I think that my hesitation of using a phrase like thought leaders, because oftentimes terms like that get tossed around as buzzwords, or like
Yeah.
the label of the century of like all of a sudden everybody's Instagram profile description is thought leader.
Mm.
And part of that is that our true identifier, or is that what we want the world to perceive us and call us and um position us?
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like these underlying desires of, man, I really hope somebody hears me and they say that I lead thoughts, or you know what I mean, which is true to what you just said about why we hesitate calling ourselves writers or poets or authors, because we're waiting for the permission of the position by someone
Yeah.
else's recognition of it, as opposed to us knowing deep down inside, this is who I am. I remember years
Right.
ago when I first got into fitness, someone someone sent me a shirt to wear for one of my classes. It was a gift. And the shirt simply said, I am an athlete. And someone not being an athlete, I was like, am I even allowed to wear this? And her
Mm,
words to me were, the way you move with this like certainty that this is my thing.
mhm,
This is what I pour my heart, my soul, my passion. I know which muscles I'm using. I know where to exert my energy. I know where to pull back. I know what's expected of me to do the work. And
mhm,
she said, that's exactly how an athlete moves. And so,
mhm.
just as you're talking about just this, put your experience on paper, or just put the emotion in your experience, put words to it, and it doesn't have to follow someone else's rhythm.
Right,
Like,
right.
I think of the scripture where Jesus says, like, are you tired and burned out on religion? Come
Mhm.
away with me and I'll show you the unforced rhythms of grace.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that the flow or the fluidity of my personal experience, however it's articulated,
yeah,
it's an unforced rhythm of grace
yeah.
that no one else can tell that story. Like, Maya Angelou is my absolute favorite poet since before it became a bandwagon. I'm like, no, I was the original fan, right?
I was here first.
Yeah, I was here first. I saw her books first. Um, but just where she said, like, a and I'm paraphrasing her quote, but there's a
Yeah,
pain and agony of the untold story
absolutely. Yeah.
someone carries. And that's where the way you speak to being a writer, no one else can tell it that way. The way you put your experience on paper, it might speak to what my story is that I couldn't articulate, but without a doubt, I can tell you, when I read your writing, it sparks something in me that makes me want to keep talking, you know?
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think, oftentimes, I mean, listen, I am the biggest fan of writing. Like I am so passionate about it. And I say that in the sense that I'm passionate about the craft of it and the construction of it and the study of it and the pursuit of it. I really am. But I mean, I also love to tear it down to its absolute basics. And what is writing but a tool?
Mm,
It's a tool. It's something that we do. A pen is a tool. A pencil is a tool. A phone is a tool, and we use that tool to do something. It's like when you cook a meal. Like, we wouldn't all necessarily walk around calling ourselves chefs, but we all cook, right? It's a tool for us to do something that we need to do, honestly, to survive,
mm,
to get by, to be fed, right? And so I really, it's a cultural thing. It's a mindset that just needs to be shifted. That
mm,
writing is a tool that is welcome to be used by anyone. Um,
mm,
and really to speak into, um, you are saying what so many people have said about my writing before, is in essence that it's relatable, right? That when I write, that they are like, oh, you're saying exactly how I felt, but I couldn't put it into words. Like, you nailed it. You said it, right? And I I will tell you this, that I honestly think that is because I tell stories. I do not I can't give you a percentage, but I will say most, if not all, of my writing is story based. It is not do this, do that, we should, we shouldn't, try this, try that. Um, I always lead with story. I always lead with people, with experience, and that is something that we all will always relate to. That's why people leave movie theaters crying, or go on Amazon and leave reviews about their favorite books. It's story that gets people.
yeah. You mentioned earlier, even just in what you were just speaking about, I love what you said. It's a tool for survival. And when we first started, you said, you started the writing community as a space for almost writing as therapy. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
how would you, well, let me rephrase that, because you said you often start with story and not as a should and would and try this. Um, speak to writing as therapy in the space of finding our own personal strength and our own personal courage, because the thing, especially in this current season that we're in, whatever season each individual is in, collectively and globally, we're in a season right,
Yeah.
that is a shared experience.
Yeah.
However, in that, we each have our individual experience that is pulling us to explore and find our own strength and our own courage, which
Absolutely.
then touches other people to find out how can we support each other within the strength and courage. But someone recently, and this is probably like three questions in one. Someone recently said to me, she said to me, I want to help you be stronger. What do you need? And I didn't know how to answer her.
Hmm.
And I said, I don't know. Maybe I don't need your help. And she was like, that's not the answer. So, and I think that if we don't know where we're strong or where we're not, and if we don't know where we're courageous or where we need courage, we don't know how to tell, we don't know how to tell that story.
For
You know,
sure.
so speak to that, even just in the spirit of writing as therapy or just wherever God wants you to speak to
For
that.
sure. No, I mean, I think you nailed it with the example that you just gave of this person asking you, I'm forgetting the question now, but she asked you a question, what do you need to be stronger? Where do you need to be strong? And so before you said that, I was already thinking, well, it starts with a question. I mean, and if you go and you see what I do in our community of Indelible Ink Writers, it's always a prompt. And what is the prompt? It's always a question. And back to my days in college when I had a small group in college. I went to a small private Christian college, Nyack College, just outside New York City. And I started a small group there. And I had wanted to do a worship small group because I sing as well, and that didn't go through. That didn't work out. And so, no, I'm sorry, I wanted to be a worship leader. I'm sorry, and that didn't work out. And so I said, well, what's the next best thing? Um, oh, I'll have a worship small group. I'll do a worship small group, and it will be even better than chapel since they didn't want me as a worship leader. I'll just have a small group that's better than chapel, right? Well, that didn't work out. And so I kept kind of scrapping for ideas. And finally, this is inspired by one of my brothers who is actually brain damaged. He loves children's books. He carries them around everywhere he goes. And so I started this small group in college called the Playpen, where I would read a children's book once a week. And then we would go into a time of journaling. And that time of journaling was always initiated with one simple question. One simple question. One thing that you would pull out of the book that people could also tie to their lives and kind of, explore that topic. So if it was, say I read Green Eggs and Ham, we all know that story, right? Sam, I am, Sam, I am. The guy doesn't want to try the food. Well, I would ask at the end of reading the book, what is one thing you're afraid of trying? Just one simple question. And wouldn't you believe it? The people in that group who don't even consider themselves writing, pouring out their hearts. And why? Because everybody wants to know themselves and they want to be known by other people. And they want to be known by God. Everyone was there really searching for something, wanting to strengthen that connection with God, And so in terms of courage and strength, I think it takes courage to ask questions, to ask ourselves questions, and to allow other people to ask ask us questions and to explore
Mm.
what those possible answers are. I think oftentimes we're afraid of questions and we're afraid to wonder. I think we're afraid of curiosity. We're afraid of tension. We're afraid of either not knowing what's right or not knowing how to be right, or we're afraid of holding two things at the same time, joy and grief, passion and, you know, discontent. Even with everything that's going on recently, there's a lot of people that are, you know, with the George Floyd trial, and now this, we have another death on our news. Like, people are juggling this tension of holding celebration but grief, and exhaustion but hope. And so when you begin to prod and ask those questions, it's scary to actually confess and say, this is what's inside of me. You know, but it takes courage, I think, to ask those questions, or to be asked them, and then strength to answer them, you know. And so, yeah, in terms of those two words and topics, and what it takes to write, you know, again, back to that idea of writing being a tool to do just that, to explore those questions and answers.
Yeah, man, this is like 5 episodes in one because
Yeah.
man, I'm like, I mean, you know, it's a good conversation where you're like, oh, we should go there. And you're like, we don't have time. Because I really do, like, I would, man, I just want to camp on what you just talked about, of just that, the tension of carrying these things, um, both subconsciously and knowingly,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
of carrying them almost like the scales of justice.
Yes. Yes.
And just, and I keep seeing this image pop up, and I'm sure that God wants to do something with it, but it's that bronze statue, and she's blindfolded and she's holding the scales,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but she's holding the scales in one hand and she's got something else in the other hand. I can't remember what's in their other hand, but she's blindfolded, and it's blind justice, which seems like an oxymoron,
Yeah.
but it is the gospel.
Yeah.
It is the line in the sand. It's a wild space that every single human, because even as you were talking about, just, we can get past the titles if we get back to humanity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that's the root of finding strength and courage, is drop the label of strength and courage,
Yeah.
because we have these perceived understandings based on our stories and experience of what we
Mm-hmm.
think strength is supposed to be, what we think courage looks like. And I love starting with questions, and people dodge my questions because they're like, she's coming back with another one. I think that's the investigative journalist in me, of like, and then what
Oh
happened?
yeah. Oh
You know?
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Like, there's so much more to your story. What are you not telling us?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But I love the idea, like the child in me came alive when you said the playpen,
Yeah.
of just pulling out. Oh man, now I'm like, I'm getting ready to borrow this and just run with it, because it, like, I am a Shel Silverstein where the sidewalk ends.
I love it. I
I
love it.
am.
I have that book in my house right now. I know
So do
exactly what
I. I have a copy of that. I have the second book that came out after that one, and I won't let anybody touch it. And I'm like, if you touch it, I will break your fingers, because
Yes.
these are poems that I grew up with, that I can remember just like smelling the pages.
Mm-hmm.
So, and so that's a weird, like, I don't even know what you call that characteristic, that like as you were talking, I could smell the pages.
Nostalgia.
Yeah, like I could
Yeah.
smell the ink on the page
Mm-hmm.
turning, of those childhood stories, of like, I remember someone said to me, because they know that that's how I like light up when I talk about like childhood stories. And I had a jacked up
Mhm.
childhood. So the fact that my mom kept stories a part of our life speaks to writing as therapy.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but someone said to me, you need to watch the movie Peter Pan, or not Peter Pan, Christopher Robin. And
Yes, that was good. Yes. Yes, that childhood wonder and yes.
oh, because you said that, like you said, it starts with a question. It takes courage to ask and to wonder and to be curious.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe that's why we won't ask or answer questions, is because there's a child in us who is desperate to be read to.
Mhm.
That if you, because you think about children, the children have this like godlike creative ability that you say, and then what? And they're like, oh, I have options. You know what I mean? And it just comes out,
Yeah.
right? And I think I shared this once on another episode, but my nephew was like this wildly creative, inquisitive child that had this imagination that was like Willy Wonka. And I would
Mm.
love to sit with him and talk to him, because he would say, and then what? And then what is you gonna do? Right? And
Yeah.
we would just keep making up the stories. And I remember when his brother was born, I would sit with him and his brother, and I would read stories to them. And my sister's 10 years older than me. So like her babies were like my babies when I was in college.
Mhm.
And I'd sit with them and just watch their eyes light up of the retelling of the story. And I share that because I genuinely think inside each one of us, there's this little kid that's waiting to be retold the story and then asked, what do you think?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what about this story is your story? And that's
Yeah.
why I say I'm totally gonna borrow this, because now I'm like in my mind playing through all the books that are on my shelf that I could pull from.
Oh,
Um,
the questions are boundless. They're
oh,
endless, and honestly, as we talk about questions, it makes me think about God in the garden, with
yeah.
Adam and Eve, and he asks them where they are, and imagine this all-knowing, all-powerful God asking his creation, the only two people on earth, where are you?
Mm.
And we, I don't know. I mean, there were only two people to be located at that time. He knew where they were. It was a question to explore, a question for them to be found, to be known, to confess,
Mm.
and that is what we all always need, is to be known and to be found and to confess. Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, this is a to be continued conversation, because
Absolutely.
I mean, just that statement, to be known, to be found, it just, I remember years ago we were going to design a t-shirt that simply said lost and found. And
Mm.
I was going to design it to look like if you were at an amusement park and they have that area where if the kid gets lost from their parents, this
Oh
is
my gosh.
it was going to look like that, like a neon lost and found sign.
Yeah.
Um, but in all sincerity, like we're running out of time on this episode, and so as we wrap up, I just wanted to allow you to invite people to find you in the spaces where you serve this, where you offer the invitation for them to be known and to be found. What would you offer the person that says, nobody knows me, nobody's looking for me, nobody's asking, where are you? Um, in the spirit of writing and putting that on paper, what would you offer someone?
Well, I would first offer them the the fact that that is probably the question that I live with every day.
Mm.
I mean, I'm an Enneagram 4. And so for those that are into the Enneagram, we all know that the 4 is just living life wanting to be known.
Mm.
And so, number one, I give you solidarity in knowing that that is my life. That is my life struggle, I will even say, is asking that question every day. And then I will say this, that it is enough for you to ask that question for yourself, to be found and to be known, for you to want to know who you are. And then it is also enough for that quest to take place just between you and God. I think things get really muddled when we attempt to put other people in that equation before even ourselves and even our creator. And so, I know I will say this, when I started out writing poetry and journal entries, it wasn't, dear God, it was, what is this inside of me and who am I because of it?
Mm.
And so I think I was seeking to know me. And through that, through God's grace, I also found him, or
Mm.
he found me, or whichever one came first. I don't even know. I just know that I'm his. And and so I want to speak to that fellowship, because it can be a lonely place, and so often we try to fill it first with other people and wanting to be known by others. It's okay, and it's good enough to be known by yourself and by God.
Mm. Man. And there's episode number 6. It just, oh man, I could sit and talk to you for hours because it's so rich that, again, back to the whole thought leader thing, that just
Yeah,
your words stir up my words, which is it is true solidarity and kindredness to
yeah,
just fan each other's flames, right? Like
yeah,
your words really do make me want to go, okay, I know there's a fire in me. I need to be pulling that thing up.
yeah.
Oh man. Ah, okay, y'all.
Well,
If I had 100 hours in an hour, it'd be fantastic, right?
yeah.
Um, so y'all, here's the deal. In the show notes, you are going to find all the links and all the places to find Rachel, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook, or to sign up for her newsletter. And I am going to encourage you to go grab a journal and a pen, and whatever this episode has stirred up in your soul, to just pour it out on paper. It doesn't have to have an order or a structure or any kind of measure or weight of value in terms of how you list it. In fact, don't make a list, because if we make a list, we start prioritizing the list. Just put it on paper, whether it's
Yeah,
a
and I'll
complete.
even
Yeah, go
I'll
ahead.
even I'll even sneak in here and give one of my favorite prompt questions that I
Please,
love to ask. I think that'd
please.
be so good. Just a simple one. What color do you most feel like in this season, and why? That's it. Just answer the question. What color do you most feel like in this season, and why?
You speak my language. I love you. Love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Oh my gosh. I think we were separated at birth.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I have some questions for you off recording, but that's another conversation. So y'all, as we wrap this up, as with every question we ask at the end of the episode is, how has this helped you to adjust your focus? And that is a question that you get to answer yourself. But if you want to reach out to us and let us know, find us on Instagram or Facebook, or even leave a review to let us know how this helped you. But until we all get to meet again, and connect. I really do pray that this has helped you think about what you're thinking about, see what God has to say about all those words floating around in your beautiful brain. And we will catch y'all on the next episode. So until then, y'all be blessed. Take care.